Welcome to the SBS video podcast, Our Deaf Ways. My name is Shirley, and I'm excited to have here Matthew Norman and Drisana Levitzke-Gray, who are two deaf Australians living overseas in Sweden and Canada. They will discuss deaf gain. Deaf gain is the word that demonstrates the positives of deafness and claims that deafness is a gain rather than a loss of hearing. Watch their conversation and you'll understand what it means. Enjoy the show.
Matthew, tell me what you think is the best thing about deaf gain.
Yeah, I've got a couple of examples, but my favourite is I can sleep in. There's no worry. My partner could be sleeping next to me, or maybe a dog will bark outside. I'm not going to hear it, or a thief might come in. You know, God forbid, they might steal something, but yeah, I'm going to sleep through that. What else? If there's a thunderstorm, if there's lots of thunder outside, or any noise, really. If there's music, if there's a party in the next room, I've got no idea. I sleep through the whole thing. It's fantastic.
Well, for me, and perhaps I'm showing my age by reflecting on my childhood like this, but being deaf itself has always been a gain for me, because part and parcel with my deafness is sign language, and I've always felt blessed to have been raised in a deaf family with access to both Auslan and written English. And as a bilingual deaf person, my worldview is rich. Our brains are more receptive to visual and other sensory inputs as opposed to those who are more audiocentric. And by that I mean people who can hear and are monolingual. So as deaf people, our cognitive functions are constantly active and constantly open to receiving new information. And one huge advantage of being bilingual, and ultimately an example of deaf gain, is our ability to understand and acquire other sign languages, like you and I have, Matthew, more easily.
Yeah, so much more.
So how deaf people see and experience the world is quite unique in that we really do tap into all of our senses. We're more sensitive to light and colour, for example, and other things around us. So that's another favourite part of deaf gain for me.
Yeah, and just related to that, when I was talking about sleeping in so well, similarly, if you go outside, walking outside, you don't hear the noises around you. So there's no impact with outside noise on your life. Let's say you're at home and you're watching a movie, and a hearing person might hear something outside, like a clatter or something, and they get really scared. And they're like, oh my God, what's going on? Well, that doesn't happen to us. It could just be a tree branch hitting something, but for deaf people, we've got no idea that that's even happened. We can continue to enjoy life more, you know? I think that's a really positive thing for us in terms of deaf gain. I think that helps us live longer.
And linked to that, another gain is that we would scare off intruders because we're not fazed by them. By appearing confident in their presence, we could be intimidating to them.
Yeah, right, that's true.
Another brilliant example of deaf gain.
Yeah, got no thinking, what's going on outside? Is there something scary outside? What's happening? What?
It could almost make the intruder second guess themselves as to what they're doing there in the first place. And then it would be like over-obliging, like, you right, mate? Do you need a drink, a coffee?
So just thinking more broadly, as a deaf person, we're actually learning two different types of language. There's the written form, I suppose, but then we have Auslan as our visual language, which really broadens our mind so much more. I mean, you've got so many friends who live around the world, right? Why do you think that is? What do you think that's about? It's about having sign.
Case in point, deaf gain and sign language.
I think for international people to learn English, it's a long time, right? And I think people from overseas are so much more adaptive to language. It's such a smoother process. I remember one time the Deaf Olympics in Bulgaria. I saw these two deaf people come together who didn't have the same sign language. They didn't have the same culture. They didn't have any connection to each other's language. They had no English, obviously, but they were communicating with each other. They were using sort of simple gestural forms, and it was fantastic. There was no problem at all. My mind was blown.
I completely agree. So you and I have experienced much of this in our travels. So there's not one universal sign language used by all deaf people across the world. What people refer to as international sign is a contact variety of sign language, and how you use it depends on where in the world and which context you're in. So if I was to converse with a deaf person from New Zealand, there's less of a shift because our sign languages are quite similar. But if I was to converse with someone from Europe, we would use signs from a variety of sign languages, constantly switching between and borrowing from them all until we find what works best for us. My husband, as you know, is a South African, and we don't share a common sign language. So whilst I can converse in South African Sign Language, I'm by no means fluent. We use a mix of South African Sign Language, Auslan, and International Sign Throwing. But if I was to travel to somewhere completely different, for example, one of the many places you and I have travelled to and lived in, Matthew, the more sign languages we're exposed to and explore, the more we're adding to our language bank. So like I said, International Sign depends on where you are, who you're with, and takes influence from many different sign languages. And it's like English. Although English is widely spoken, you couldn't say it's the global language, could you? Although there were attempts to have one with Esperanto, but it didn't take off.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. They tried to do it. It didn't work, did it? And you know why? Because it's not a visual language. There you are. There's more deaf gain. All forms of sign are a visual language around the world. But to have a spoken language that's a new thing for everyone in the world to learn, it's not going to work.
So as you can see, there are just so many things to celebrate as deaf gain. You and I are not in Australia at the moment, Matthew. We're both living abroad. And am I correct in that your partner is deaf, Matthew?
Yep. My partner's profoundly deaf, amazing signer. How about you?
As is my husband. You and I both moved overseas to be with our partners, and the common thing that brought us together was the deaf community. So had we not been a part of it or not used sign language, I wouldn't have met my husband.
Yeah. No, I would have never met. So I met my partner through her friend, and I knew her friend from Sweden. And so eventually then met my partner. So that's, I guess, a little bit of deaf gain as well, because we're all connected throughout the world. It's a bit like a spider's web, isn't it? How about you?
My now husband and I first met at the World Federation of the Deaf Congress in South Africa in 2011, and we got along as friends. Soon after, I relocated to Europe to participate in a deaf youth leadership program called Frontrunners. So I lived and studied in Denmark for a year, as well as travelled around the continent. And we met again because he was in neighbouring Sweden promoting his children's book and teaching 3D animation workshops. We were so close, only 3 hours away by train, so we decided to meet up for the weekend. And as they say, the rest is history. This year, we celebrate being together for 10 years.
And that's what the weekend becomes. Yeah, right?
And yet again, another example of deaf gain. So being involved in the deaf community and participating in the wonderful events and opportunities it presents brought us both together. Deaf gain is incredible. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and they're all deaf events. So they're all deaf-related things. It makes it so easy to meet people. That's why I think people meet their deaf partners so easily, because there's so much set up for us, which is specifically for us. That's deaf gain.
Absolutely. Deaf events come in many forms, youth camps, congresses, and not all have to be focused on political topics like human rights. Like you mentioned earlier, Matthew, the Deaf Olympics in Bulgaria. There's various sporting events. And in years gone by, the deaf community really enjoyed a thriving arts and theatre scene. So my point is, deaf people are not one homogenous group where we all share the same interests. Far from it. Of the millions and millions of deaf people around the world, we each have individual interests. Yeah. What a rich community.
So our partners are profoundly deaf, right? Super great with their signing. So that's a form of deaf gain because communication's so easy between us.
Absolutely.
So if you have a deaf person meeting a hearing person, Yeah, some hearing people can sign, of course. There's a lot of variation with their skills. But if a hearing person doesn't have any sign, then we can't understand them. And that's them not being supportive of deaf gain, right?
And of course, not to dismiss people who can hear, but I have to admit, having a deaf husband where I can just be, where I do not have to explain myself,
Yeah, true.
that to me is deaf
Yeah,
gain.
it's automatic.
Deafhood is a concept that describes the unique journey of a deaf person. And so my husband and I both have that shared lived experience of being a deaf person, and that common experience unites us. People who can hear, that live amongst us, might see our journey and experience parts of it, but will never completely understand what it feels like to be deaf. They've only seen what it's like from the periphery, and they won't have faced the same barriers that we have. So whether it's being with deaf friends, a deaf partner, or a deaf family, there is a sense of comfort and belonging and just being. And for those who may not have deaf family or a deaf partner, there's still a wider global deaf community that they belong to, which again is deaf gain.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. And related to that, something else I've just thought of, when you're swimming in water. I mean, I feel sorry for hearing people in this regard, really, because they can't speak underwater.
No, that's a big no-no.
Right? But what can we do? We can sign underwater.
It's beautiful.
It's fab.
I remember when I was younger going along to a friend's place where they had a pool. I didn't swim that day, but I was still able to be a part of the conversation because they had a pool glass wall.
Yeah.
So I could still chat with everyone who was swimming using sign language, even when they were underwater, and really feel like I was in there. You couldn't do that if you couldn't sign. How would you speak underwater? Speaking of glass and windows, here's some more deaf gain for you. We can communicate through glass walls and windows, regardless of how far apart we are.
Yep. Even if you're a long way away. Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard. So now think of shouting at someone across like a freeway to hearing people trying to talk to each other going, oh, blah, blah, watch out for that pole. And then they run into a pole. Okay. So, but for deaf people, we can sign across the freeway. Oh, hey, look out for that pole. And they say, oh, wow. Gosh, sorry. Thanks for that. It's brilliant.
Using your pole example in such a great demonstration of deaf culture, we don't need to interrupt the flow of conversation to alert someone to the fact that there's a pole in our path. Simply, the person who spots it first in their peripheral vision will quickly move in a direction so that both people bypass the pole, and the second person will intuitively follow their lead without a second thought. And another big gain that deaf people enjoy, again related to conversation, is the whole world could pass through our conversation and we continue along as though it's just us in the room. Often hearing people will teeter on the edge of a conversation not wanting to pass through as though they think it's impolite. But it's the opposite.
I mean, hearing people stand there and wait for 50 years until they're old with a cane saying, oh, excuse me, can I play? I'm like, what? No.
Right? Waiting for the right moment for the conversation to stop. Waiting for us to stop so they can go forward. Honestly, though, nothing can really deter our focus when deaf people are in conversation. People can pass through us, cars can, jackhammers surround us, anything really. And it's not to say that we're ignoring or oblivious to what's happening around us. Rather, we have super visual strengths. And it's true that deaf people can see further into our visual periphery, which means while we're in conversation, we're still actively monitoring the environment around us. Nothing shocks us. We're completely aware. Would you agree, Matthew?
Yeah. Spot on. I agree. And that's why I feel our peripheral vision is so strong, because we can see a hearing person loitering like a little fly on the side of me. Like, it's okay, just go through. Our communication isn't going to get interrupted by you. Walk straight through, fine. Run through, that's fine. A dog runs through, fine. But if you just stand here staring at me, that's going to really aggravate me, because you're trying to be polite. I know I'm handsome. I know you're staring at me because but please just walk through. But I know that there is a way to communicate with a deaf person who's even on a plane. Let's imagine you're not on the plane and they're on the plane. Maybe they're even in the air. You can communicate with them. How do you think you can do that?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on how close you are. So if we're talking a small plane and you're sitting together or close together, that's one thing. But if you're on a jumbo and on opposite ends of the plane, and how would you communicate?
Yeah, well, if the plane's got Wi-Fi, right? Turn on your camera, start signing. It's brilliant. Think about it. A lot of planes now have Wi-Fi in them. So
video calling has been incredible for us. You'd feel the same living in Sweden. Living here in Canada, I naturally miss my deaf family so much. But with thanks to technology, I'm able to video call them and still see them every day. People who can hear, of course, can speak over the phone, but there's nothing like seeing your loved ones' faces, is there? Of course, anyone can use video calling technologies, but deaf people are masters of it because we use it all the time. I laugh so hard when I see some people trying to use it and only capturing parts of their face.
That's my mum. Oi.
My parents, being deaf, are all over it. They've got the proper setup, the framing down pat, and we can sit there comfortably and chat as though we're in the same room. And here we have another example of deaf gain, knowing how to properly use technology. So often I'm in Zoom meetings where people speaking into the camera only show half of their face or their awkward angles, whereas with deaf people, it's almost like lights, camera, action. We know how to best be seen on video calls.
Yeah, and it feels like it's automatic. It's inbuilt with how we communicate. We're already thinking visually, like thinking about the lighting. We're thinking about plain clothes we're wearing. We're thinking about the size of the frame as we're signing. It's perfect. So noise doesn't affect us as well, but obviously for hearing people, they've got to think about background noise. Is the room quiet?
Sometimes technology doesn't work perfectly. For instance, when the internet drops out. A frozen screen is no use to anybody. But if the vision is slightly blurred or in slow motion, deaf people can still make out what's being signed. That's because, deaf gain again, sign languages have their own grammatical rules and structure, and each sign has parameters such as hand shape, orientation, location, movement, and expression associated with it. So if someone's signing clearly, they're following the grammatical rules and using the parameters, then it's quite easy to capture what's being signed, even if the video call quality is poor. But if someone doesn't use some of the parameters, for example, is expressionless or uses the wrong hand shape, then meaning can be lost. Otherwise, it is easy enough, most of the time, for deaf people to track what's being signed. And we can still have a comfortable conversation. We got you.
Yep, true. That's definitely deaf gain, okay? Because think about people, hearing people speaking on the phone. If you miss some of those words, you don't know what's going on. You don't have the context for the conversation. It's like if you had written English, but then every few words was left out. Could you make sense of that sentence? You can't, because English is such a weird language in and of itself. You know, if you get is or are around the wrong way, it changes the whole meaning of the sentence.
I 100% agree with you.
So, yeah, I often think, oh, those poor hearing people, thank God it doesn't affect us. That's not an issue at all, right? So like you said, your family were all deaf. My family were all hearing. Hey, so they always try to get my attention. Like, obviously, I had hearing aids growing up, so they just said my name, right? So that's my situation. But I'm wondering about your situation, how your family tries to get your attention. I know you've probably got a whole bunch of different methods they use to yeah.
How we got each other's attention would sometimes differ, depending on whose attention we were trying to get. So as you know, both of my parents and my brother are also deaf. And when I was younger, I wore hearing aids. I don't wear them anymore as they're no use to me. But back then, and I'll never forget, if my father and brother felt like being lazy, they would call out what they thought sounded like my name. And at first it sounded really strange, but over time I became used to their calling out to be for me. But sometimes I wouldn't respond. I would have stubborn moments where I would decide to be completely deaf and pretend I didn't hear them. As you can imagine, it would frustrate them, so they would resort to stomping the ground or banging objects or even yell more loudly. And it wasn't the loud noises they were making that would get my attention. It was the vibrations they were creating.
Mm.
But most of the time our family will get each other's attention if they're looking the other way by switching lights on and off. Oh, and here are two more perfect examples of deaf gain. Another way of getting a deaf person's attention is to tap them gently on the shoulder. And if they do that, you can tell what sort of mood they're in based on the pressure or the frequency of the tap. So if it's a gentle tap, fine. If the taps are frequent or hard, someone might be angry. Sometimes the tap's casual, other times it can be abrupt. And it's the same with switching lights. It's almost like Morse code, judging by the frequency and speed of the flashing lights. You can read someone's mood, can't you? Stomping a wooden floor to send off vibrations is another way we seek someone's attention. And I'm sure there are people out there that might consider that as aggressive or rude, but it's not. It's just a really effective way of trying to get another deaf person to look our way. I would have to say, of light switching, tapping the shoulder and stomping the floor, stomping is the most commonly and favoured method of getting deaf people's attention, for sure. What about you, Matthew?
Yeah. It's very similar to your ones, the light flicking on and off or banging things. My brother once threw something at my head, so I had to look around and see what was going on.
To our hearing audience, I do not recommend you do that. Perhaps only amongst mates.
No. I would encourage people more to write on a little piece of paper. Don't chuck a knife at me, for example.
If anyone
no
dared
knives.
throw something at me to get my attention, I would be furious. If you want my attention, you can switch lights on and off, tap me on the shoulder or stop the floor. Thank you very much. I think sometimes it might be used in a workplace where people claim they've tried calling out to a deaf person who hasn't turned, and so they might throw something their way. But I would say this is bullying behaviour. It's fine amongst mates, but when it happens to the only deaf person in a room or setting, it's a different story. With mates, though, I guess there are no limits as to what you might do.
Yeah, well, actually, on that, do you think this is deaf gain, our directness? You know how hearing people get very, should I do this or not? Should I say this or not? Deaf people are like, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Just be direct. You're wearing the wrong colour shirt, or the lighting's no good. Fix up the lighting. Or we say, what's that smell? Can you go have a shower? We're so direct, right? But now think about hearing people saying, there's a really funny smell in this room, and I don't know what that is. I know I had a shower this morning, so I'm fine. And then they leave the room and I have to go, oh my God, I think they were talking about me. Why didn't they just say something to me? Why did they waffle on with this nonsense? Ugh. That is deaf gain, our bluntness, our directness with how we talk. And it just made me think of another example. You know the movie The Matrix from all those years ago? So I remember there was a lot of talk at the time because it was so visual, and a lot of deaf people were talking about that specific scene where Trinity jumps up and the other agent is around her and they're frozen in time. And deaf people use their humour to really expand on that. And they think of absurd situations like, and then she took a dump in midair and the camera froze and ran around, and it was just ridiculous things like that's something that's very deaf, to blow out an absurd situation, to make it funny with a couple of different ideas. But hearing people can't do that. They can speak, but they can just describe visually what they saw with their words. So they have to say, she jumped up in the air and then he floated around her.
I know exactly what you mean. It's much the same when you're providing directions to someone. Using sign language, you can recreate a map using the space right in front of you, creating visual reference points or specifying particular landmarks by size or colour even. And I believe that people are so much better at navigating directions or giving instructions because the information, when presented visually, is so clear. Not only are we advantaged by our enhanced visual capacities, but in the way we can communicate so freely using sign language. I really cherish that part of being deaf, the way in which we share information. Here in Vancouver, I live in an apartment on the 53rd floor. And when I describe the size of the building and how far up it I live, I get the exact same reaction from them as I'm getting from you right now. We face west, which means we see the sunset every day and it's spectacular. And to anyone else, you might simply say, I live on the 53rd floor, and that would be it. But to a deaf person, using sign language, I can go to great lengths to describe the building and what it's like to live there, so much so that people might feel like they're there with me. And to live on the 53rd floor is quite unheard of to many Australians, as you don't often see skyscrapers, let alone live in them back home. And sign languages being visual, spatial languages, describing the building and then offering instructions as to how to get to my front door from the lobby are mesmerising to watch, and a really efficient way of communicating at the same time.
So what was amazing about what you just did, how you described your building, I could feel that. I had a mind map going on. I got the sense of how it feels to get in your building. And like, that's Deaf Gain. How we visualize things, how we create those moments, how we get a sense. We really make it cinematic. Like it's 3D, it's 4D even.
I was going to say, it beats watching the average movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
You really get
4D,
the sense that you're there. Yeah, and you're right. It's like 4D, 20D.
Well, 5D now. What are we up to? Like, I don't know.
I actually read somewhere recently
do we
that
have
a
3D? Are we on
9D movie was
4D
produced
now?
where
8?
all of your senses, such as smell, were stimulated. But I also learned that the same movie wasn't captioned, so it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Big minus.
Yep. That's, yeah.
We've talked about our common experiences in travelling extensively overseas and meeting many international deaf friends and attending different events. And all of these stories we collect and we share with our community. In the way they are presented visually, it can really make others feel like they were there with us. Because I grew up in a deaf family, I was always around other deaf people. From a young age, really looked up to some of the older deaf generation. I loved watching their stories and learning about their journeys. And recently, my aunt died at almost 99. She was the oldest person in our family. Unfortunately, I was unable to see her before she passed due to COVID travel restrictions. And we didn't use video calling because she wasn't confident with using technology. But from a young age until she passed, I would love seeing her stories of her youth. And because the language is so rich, I would feel like I'd been transported back in time and was living it with her.
Yeah.
Many deaf people are such skilled storytellers.
Yeah. It's already, because it's visual. It's a visual language. So there's so many parts that go into that visual language. I mean, the language in and of itself is visual, but then think of how a person uses that sense and how they describe things and how they use colour and, create that image, which makes it so much easier for us to get immersed in that story and think, oh, wow, I'm here. I'm really in that. That is one of the best things about Deaf Gain, honestly. That and Sleeping In are my two favourites.
Here's another interesting take on Deaf Gain for you. Many technological advancements and innovations have come about because of deaf people. So the concept of universal design has been encouraged by deaf people's contributions. Take text messaging as an example. When mobile phones started to take off, deaf people brought attention to the fact that they weren't accessible to them. So they used texting instead, which hearing people scoffed at. Do you remember how it used to cost like 20 cents a text and you were limited by character count? So in a bid to save money, people would ration how many texts they sent and how many characters they used. That's when we started to use text messaging.
And you'd get this huge, and you'd have to cram it in.
L8R for later, or C, the letter C instead of
yeah. So
C,
what's that? 182 characters or something? That's the limit. All that for 20 cents. Yeah, and now.
So people should be grateful to the deaf community for this, because now everyone would much prefer to text than call, right? A deaf space is another idea that has universal appeal. You see more often now open office spaces or open floor plans in homes. So spaces with lots of rooms, walls and hallway turns are not ideal for deaf people. Rather, open spaces where they can see things around them are much more deaf-friendly. Before I moved to Vancouver, I purchased a house in my hometown of Perth, and it was one of my non-negotiables that it needed an open floor plan. The house was narrow,
Yeah,
but it suited me because when I sat in my office, I would face the front and could see anytime someone approached the front door. So I was never startled by unexpected guests ringing the doorbell. And then even when standing from my back door, I could see all the way to the front. So the house was great because regardless of which room I was in, I could see what was happening around me and always felt safe. So whilst open spaces are a popular choice for people now, deaf people were all for it first. And what most call open space, we call deaf space, where you can see everything happening around you.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Because deaf already grow up in that environment, don't they? They're already aware of that. That's a huge part of deaf gain. I remember a friend of mine, their family has a holiday home sort of way out on the coast in Sweden. And I'd visited there. And there was one particular area in the house that was my favourite. You know, the kitchen island. You know, that bench that's smack bang in the middle of a kitchen. And then around there was sort of all these cupboards and the visuals were blocked, the eye lines were blocked. And I said to the family, hey, see these cupboards? These would be so much better up against that back wall over there. And they said, why? What's going on? I said, well, it makes it open plan. Now, some hearing families might think, oh, God, I've got to move a cupboard out of the way or something. But they did, and it made it so much better. That's an instance of deaf gain, I reckon, because it's visualising the space. It's making sure things are open. We can all see each other. There's no blockages to our line of sight. Like we've got our own feng shui already built in, for want of a better expression.
Deaf gain doesn't just apply to deaf people. A lot of the things our community have advocated for have had direct impact on the wider population. For example, captioning.
Yeah, right. And you can just...
This is beneficial to so many people, such as kids improving their literacy, or recently arrived immigrants wanting to learn or to improve their English. And even those who find loud volumes overwhelming and prefer to watch movies or television in silence, they can still access their entertainment via captions. I know many people who can hear who prefer to watch television with captions. So our needs and solutions to meet those needs end up everybody's gain. Do you know what I mean? I just think it's great that our innovations or advocacy has far more reach than just the deaf community. And I think that's one of the greatest things about being deaf. We're not anyone's burden. We make this world a better place to live in.
Yep. We make the world a better place because we add improvements to the world. We share our knowledge with the world. We have different perspectives and we put them all together and it makes the world a better place to live for everybody. I absolutely agree. I've got a funny story. You know when we kind of talk about, oh, it's the deaf way, and we do that sign to me, oh, that's a very deaf thing. I think a lot of people experience a very similar thing, and like being in Sweden for so long as well. Once going out to a restaurant, I was with my partner, and two friends came and we were both sat in front of each other having this really great conversation all through the night. It was really engrossing. And suddenly I realised all the staff were cleaning and doing vacuuming behind me. And I looked around and there were no other hearing people in the entire place. And it was closed. And no one came to interrupt us. I guess they saw that we were in such a great conversation and they left us to just have that experience. And I think that's absolutely amazing. I could have been there for the rest of my life having that conversation. Like, that's deaf gain. We didn't get any interruptions. We didn't have any idea.
I think this note is a nice one to wrap things up on. If businesses and services made themselves more accessible, then they would attract more deaf clientele, which can only be good for their turnover, right? I would even encourage deaf people to set up their own businesses, like a cafe or a bar. Imagine the return they would make when deaf people spend hours and hours catching up in their venue, right?
Yeah, like 24 hours, staying there constantly, all night, all day.
It's great business. I've really enjoyed chatting with you today, Matthew, on all things deaf gain. It's been great.
You too, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, good on ya. Deaf gain, it's the best, right?
Now you see that being deaf has lots of benefits, from not being awakened by sound to working in a place that has a lot of noise. Here, deaf workers are able to better focus because they're not bothered by the sound of machinery. From increased and improved visual abilities, better peripheral vision, to alternative ways of thinking and problem solving, social structure, and much more. So that's it for now. See you next episode.